So this is Sean with TWA Stories. We're here with Harold Atkins in your home here in Brownsburg, and we've got some memorabilia around you. The big TWA Europe poster here. Tell me a little bit about that. How old is that, and how did you acquire it?
That's probably from the 60s or 70s. It hung in the TWA air freight facility. When we closed up the facility, I was tasked with going down and cleaning all of the stuff out of it before they turned it back over to the airport authority. And I found that it's laying in the corner, so I confiscated it.
Now you also told me that if you were going to find one that they could be worth a lot of money, right?
Oh, yeah, some of those are worth. The New York particular is worth a lot of money. One of the originals.
Okay, all right. So you were born September 14th in 1936, and your parents, what were their names?
Avery Atkins and Margaret Hanover Atkins.
And what was their careers? What did they do?
Farmers.
Farmers.
Yeah.
And what city?
Paxton, Illinois, and then later Buckley. And well, my dad later he became a Caterpillar operator. He had bought a small Caterpillar to do some clearing work on the farm, and local farmers kept coming around for him to go over and do some work for him. Finally decided he had another career, so he bought a big D7, then he had a D8 Caterpillar. Basically, he leased the farm then and done Caterpillar work for the rest of his life.
And you went to Hanover. Was that the name of your high school?
What?
What was the name of your high school?
Buckley Loda.
Oh, Buckley Loda. So did you engage in any sports or anything in high school?
Not really. I was in agriculture, but I was never very athletic. I played a little on the junior varsity, a few minutes.
Okay.
Played very poorly.
Now, you went to University of Illinois for aviation.
Yes.
What was the whole motivation behind that when you were in high school or getting close to college? What really drove you to want to go into aviation?
Well, we had an Air Force recruiter come to the high school and gave us a talk, and the whole class, after he left, we were all going to enlist in the Air Force. At that point, the principal of the school, who had been an infantry captain in World War II, well, in fact, almost all the teachers had been in the service. They said, "We need to have a little talk with you guys. That guy must have been one heck of a salesman." But myself and one other guy, we kind of thought we would like to pursue a career in aviation. The university had little pamphlets that they had at the high schools, and there was one on the Institute of Aviation, and we thought, well, we would go down, become pilots, and make big money.
So you got your pilot's license as well, right?
I never got a commercial. After I went to work for TWA, I kind of changed my goal. I thought I'd become a flight engineer. I'd just as soon be a flight engineer as a pilot. But then when they did start hiring a few years, my first year was there, they were laying off pilots. And when they finally started hiring, they wasn't hiring mechanic flight engineers. You had to be a pilot. And I was going to go ahead and get my commercials, but at that time I was married, had 2 kids. My wife was not all that enthused about me becoming a pilot. You were gone. A junior pilot was gone quite a bit. You'd be out for 3 or 4 days, home 2 or 3 days, out 3 or 4 days.
Do you remember the first time you took a plane up solo?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, it was, we done takeoffs and landings. They had moved us all over to the grass strip, and we were flying a raucous 7ACs, and so we done a takeoff and landing with the instructor. Then he climbs out and said, "Okay, go do one on your own," and stuff. And so I done a couple. He waved me down and said, "You're not stalling it enough. You got to slow it down a little more before you land. You're landing on the front 2 wheels a little too much. Not a 3-point landing like they wanted." So I done a few more. So that was my first solos, and basically
Were you nervous or anything? Were you nervous?
Not really.
No,
not really. Probably the first nervous I got was they sent us up to do spins. We had to, at that time, you had to learn to do spins and spin recovery. And so going out the first time and intensely spinning the airplane where you're looking straight down at the ground, you're just a little nervous about that first time.
that seems like it would be a little nerve-wracking. All right, so what was your path to TWA? How did you get connected? What was your motivation to go work for them? What was that whole situation leading up to it?
I was working for Allison Gas Turbines, and I was getting a little bored with the job. We were in the fuel cell sections where basically we'd done tests and kept the fuel cell or the fuel components of their test engines, checked them, and we had already had a layoff. They'd lost a military contract, so they laid off. So I thought, well, I kind of wanted to move on. I kind of thought I'd like to get some experience on my mechanic's license. And so one of the guys at work told me, "Hey, TWA is hiring mechanics out at the airport." And so I thought, well, I'll go out. And they basically hired me on the spot. And so I quit Allison on the 6th and started TWA 7.5 hours later on the 7th.
So what were you working on right at the beginning?
Mostly Martin 404s, 202s. And
how many people did that sit?
That would carry 44 people.
Okay.
And it was an easy airplane to work on. Had a Pratt & Whitney R28 engine, which did not give a great deal of problem. And but I really didn't have any experience working on transport type airplanes at school, we worked on primarily small, personal aircraft to get the license and stuff. And within 3 or 4 weeks, I would have found myself working on a twilight shift by myself, and I was just hoping nothing would break down. And then an airplane came in with a 404 came in with a prop problem. I changed a couple of prop governor or something else, hadn't fixed the problem. One of the older mechanics, he happened to be coming through, and I talked to him, and he said, "Well, you're doing everything I would do. Lots of luck." But that was when I found out about blade switches. All that was wrong with it was a blade switch had stuck. And I had flipped the blade switch, and I heard the motor run, and crew said, "Oh, everything working great. We're ready to go." So after that, I knew how to troubleshoot props. And that was the way you learned.
So what, like, you had to have a couple mentors, or at least who were some of the people that really kind of taught you the ropes?
Guy by the name of Jim Keller. He was a mechanic, had been with the airline probably 10 years or so. He was always interested in trying to teach us stuff. My biggest mentor was a very senior mechanic, Bob Kane. His seniority date went back to 1929. He had personal reactions with Lindbergh, Howard Hughes, people like that and stuff. And so.
All right, so as you were working for TWA, and it was, going international and becoming, one of the biggest airlines on the planet, what did you see technology-wise as it first started really expanding that really set it apart from the other airlines?
Well, TWA always was a pilot's airline. Pilots really controlled it, and they had a good engineering section, and they more or less led the industry in new things.
What's some of the first things you remember when you were working there What's some of the first things they introduced that you were amazed by?
Well, we had a guy by the name of Morelli. He come up with a valve check on, it was called the Morelli valve check, that you could check the valve clearance without actually taking all of the covers off and measured everything. You could find if a valve had excessive clearance by this check, and they had some other checks. Well, now the leading one that TWA came up with was the ETOPS. TWA was the industry leader of flying twin-engine airplanes across the Atlantic. They were the ones that proved it. They owned the STC on the 767s. There were three modifications to the airplane to fly the Atlantic with twin engines. And they were the ones that developed them with Boeing, and they owned the STCs, it's my understanding. They eventually sold them to Boeing, but TWA was the fact everybody flies twin engine across the Atlantic now goes back to TWA.
Wow. So were you ever working on an engine, just on some general maintenance and stumbled across something that you realized that was a big problem, and that if you hadn't noticed that the plane would have gone down? Was there any of those type of situations?
No, not that drastic. Yeah, and you're working on an engine, you might find a cracked cylinder, uh, but that would have caused a engine shutdown, but airplane wouldn't have crashed. Uh, I think one of the things, well, one night I did have a airplane, a 727, had a lot of precipitation, static on the airplanes, which is kind of knocks out communications. And we did find that the tail cone, they had recently, not too long, come out of overhaul. And what had happened, there were ground wires that went back to the static wicks. And there was one screw at the very top that went into aircraft structure. And that's what grounded the static wicks to dissipate static electricity. And if that's not dissipated, it'll cause static in your radios. And so we found it, and of course it's a rainy night. The top of that stabilizer is about 40 feet in the air. And, wind was blowing. Didn't really want to get up on top of it, but the maintenance control said, you gotta fix it. So had to go up and drill a hole, kind of line it up and put that screw in. The mechanic working with me, he carried that screw. It was a 832 screw about that long, and he carried that for a long time, said a 727 will not fly without that screw.
All right. So what were the different types of planes that you've worked on over the years, and what do you think are some of the, I don't know, consistent issues that you'd come across?
Well, of course, the Lockheed Connies, the consistent issue with them were oil leaks. We had a joke that it was the right external lubrication system. They were always dripping oil. It was just the nature of the engine. So when they got too bad, you had to try and find some of the leaks and fix them. And, as opposed to that, I mentioned the Pratt & Whitney, it didn't leak oil. It was, of course, the Connies, like I said, the engines were what we worked on the most. You had some radio problems and compass problems occasionally. Then when the 707s came along, the Boeings, of course, with them, tires and brakes then became one of the biggest maintenance issues, because they landed so fast and they weighed so much that they really...
How much would they weigh?
Oh, heavens, I can't tell you now. Hundreds of some thousand pounds.
Okay.
I used to carry a thing that told me how much they weighed, how much fuel they carried.
Right.
Because people would always ask me, well, how many gallons do they carry? Just a minute, I'll tell you, because I couldn't remember it. And I've still got it in my garage somewhere.
So what did you really love about working on the planes? Like, what really kept you going over all those
I,
years.
I got to the point I liked as 707s and then 727s. It became more electrical problems, more electronic problems, and I like to troubleshoot autopilots and some of the electrical problems and stuff. I got pretty good, and the air conditioning problems that was fairly troublesome. Well, the 707s, the cooling freon packs were fairly troublesome, and
was there ever pressure issues that it wasn't having enough air pressure within the cabin?
Oh,
that
not too much. Now the 727 had an issue. At times when it reached the top of climb and they leveled off, all at once the pressurization would automatically dump, and they normally carried about 8 inches of pressure, and it would automatically dump down to about 6 inches. Never did figure out what caused it. Engineering had ideas, but we never could figure out just why. It was just one of those things that happened. I happened to be on an airplane one time flying from St. Louis to Indianapolis, and I could tell he was losing altitude and pressure was going down, and so I met the flight engineer and I told him exactly what happened, and he said, yeah, I said, I didn't get control of it until about 6 inches. I said, you didn't have to do anything. That's where it was going to go. I said, he said, well, what's the problem? I said, nobody knows. I said, it's just one of these things. They think their airflow over a sensor somehow triggers it, but they can't prove it and stuff.
Did you ever hear about a plane that you worked on that something ended up going wrong on it, or anybody that you worked with that they'd worked on a plane and then something happened kind of tragically afterwards?
Yeah. We, on the Douglas DC-9s, to work on the instruments, you had to pull the panel out, and it had about 2 or 3 screws, and a couple of mechanics, one named Warner, the other named Plummer. They had worked on this airplane, and they had shoved the panel back up. They may have fastened one fasten, we're not sure, or they may have not fastened any. But trying to think, I used to know the captain's name. Anyway, on takeoff from Indianapolis, when they climbed out, the captain's instrument panel fell out in his lap. So, of course, he tells the co-pilot to fly the airplane while he's trying to stuff it back up in place. And after that, they put a little clip up at the top that the crew could see that secured the panel. And we always referred to that as the Warner Plummer safety switch.
All right, so you got to enjoy some benefits of travel, right?
Oh yeah.
So where was like the first place that you said, I'm gonna go here? What was the first goal that you accomplished by utilizing the benefits of travel?
That would have been I hadn't even completed a year, and at that time, I didn't intend to stay with Tibbs. I was just going to work couple of years, get some experience and move on to something else. So I could travel domestically, and so the farthest spot I could go was San Francisco. So I took a trip to San Francisco. I I'll see, I started September, it was June of the next year. So I went to San Francisco for a week. And I actually, one of the guys I went to school with, he worked at San Francisco. So one night he was working midnight. So I did take the bus out the airport, spend the night with him. But I saw San Francisco in that'd have been in 58. It was when it was still a nice place. You had your hippies.
Right. All right, what about taking your family? What's one of the favorite places you took your family?
My wife, her favorite place was Hawaii. We wound up going there, I think, 5 times. And the kids liked Hawaii. Primarily the kids liked going to LA, Disneyland, or then my parents wintered in Florida, so every year we'd fly to Florida to see them, and I took them to Europe about 3 or 4 times, so they got to see the world and stuff.
What's one of the favorite places that you always kind of gravitated back to?
I like Rome. I thought Rome was very interesting.
Well, and ironic, you have the Colosseum in that you're a poster right next to you.
Yeah. I guess I visited Rome 3 or 4 times.
So out of all your years at TWA, what do you think you really got out of it the most? What do you think was the biggest benefit for you for working there?
I enjoyed the work. I stayed on midnights quite a bit because I could get the weekends off. Plus, the midnight shift is where you actually worked on the airplanes. You had the time, and I enjoyed troubleshooting, and particularly maybe a problem that has been floating around for several days that nobody seemed to be able to fix, that find out and fix it and stuff. And
you never got flown to another city to work on theirs? You always were based...
Oh, no, I went out to Terre Haute. Did have to go up to Fort Wayne once or twice. That's basically just the work flight. But no, that was voluntary. You could, sometimes at Dayton or some other small station, they'd ask for help for an engine change. And you could go if you wanted to, but I was not willing to work a lot of overtime, so I never really took too many of the road trips and stuff.
Well, so what do you think are some of the most important benchmarks in TWA's history as far as development or major things that happened that were good, bad? You know, what do you think are some major benchmarks that happened throughout TWA?
Of course, they were the first airline to go all jet. They were the first airline to go all jet. One of the bad things that happened, Howard Hughes owned the airline up until the 60s, and he made a lot of the decisions, and he ordered about 30 Convair 880s. TWA Engineering really didn't want the airplane. but he liked it, so he ordered them. But up until that point, Hughes Tool Company financed the airlines, the planes. At that point, they did not have the capital to finance them, and he was going to have to go to the banks. Well, he didn't like banks. Banks didn't like him. And so they basically would not finance the airplanes. And we had probably for a year, early in the jet age, we had up to 15 or 20 Convair 880s sitting in San Diego unused because Hughes couldn't get the financing to release them to the airline, which we would have really hurt a lot of other airlines if we'd have got those jets at that time. And eventually he had to give up controlling interest in the airline to get the jets. And then eventually he sold, since he couldn't control it, he sold it. And which was one of his saddest. TWA was his prized possession, you might say. And when he lost it, I think he went downhill mentally after that. He was a germ freak. He would hibernate himself, not see anybody. If you've ever seen the movie Aviator, that's a pretty good movie, pretty accurate about him and stuff. And TWA was a big part of the story of the Aviator, One Trip, and Pan Am. The two were always kind of loggerheads at each other.
Right.
Stuff.
So do you remember where you were when Flight 800 went down?
I think I heard about it from my daughter. I think she called, told me about it. Yeah.
What went through your head?
My first instructions were and indications were that the Iranians had shot it down with a shoulder-fired missile from a boat. We had shot down an Iranian airliner out in the Persian Gulf, if you remember right. And my first thought was that was payback. Then, as things have progressed, it looks like our U.S. Navy shot it down. And since it's still an FBI investigation, you cannot get any information out of them because it's still an ongoing investigation.
Right.
They will not release anything.
Right.
And even though hundreds of people saw the streaks of light go from the water up to the airplane.
There's a documentary now that's on Netflix that kind of touches on it a little bit.
I've got one. It's kind of a pirated one, but this was some young guy that he was a college student, not even associated with the airlines. And when he started watching the, particularly some of the videos that they were showing about not being a missile, he said, that's propaganda. That's not, they're trying to, so he got interested in this because of what he saw as on TV and stuff. And it was pretty conclusive to me what he proved and stuff, that there was an explosion, that there were explosive residue on the airplane, even explains the cloud people said they saw in the turn of the airplane, that it was the fuel coming out of the tank, that wing lost lift, the airplane turned, and so it will probably, in our lifetimes, nobody will know. Maybe 100 years from now, it'll come out exactly what happened, and stuff.
So, are there any other things you'd like to touch on that are just great memories that happened with other coworkers or your family, just working with TWA over the years?
Well, one little funny story. I got picked as a person of the year, and there would be probably 100 or 120 of us, and they'd have a big meeting somewhere. The year I went happened to be in Rome, and I remember I was they gave us bus trips, and we were going down to Naples, out to Isla Capri, and there was a young Italian tour guide, and one of the guys, he was a rep in LaGuardia. He was Italian himself, and he started talking to this guy in the car by the bus, and he talking to him and said, "Grandpa, what are you going to do? Shoot some rabbits or something?" And everybody kind of looked out, and here's this old guy with a big shotgun between his legs in the car. And the tour guide, he kind of looks around and sees what's going on. He said, "You better be careful there. You might get an offer you don't want to refuse." So we were in mafia territory down there.
Gotcha. All right. So what would you say is over, you said 37 years, right? 37 years. What would you say is I guess the biggest benefit that you learned from working there and with the people and just the technology you got to work on and everything?
Well, I enjoyed working on the airplanes. Actually, working on the airplanes, we had microwave. The first microwaves I ever saw were on the airplanes. So I learned how to fix them. They had Freon packs, which is basically your air conditioning unit in your house. So got a background on working on those. And just the overall exposure to various mechanical things. Plus, I tried to get along with people. There was always guys hard to get along with, but you try to get along with people and be civil to everybody. and of course, I enjoyed the travel. Our pay was subpar compared to every other airline. It seemed like we were on the low end of the totem pole on pay, but I made a good living and saw a lot of the world that I would not have seen otherwise. So I've enjoyed it, and most people, when they hear you've worked for an airline, they perk up and want to ask you a bunch of questions about what's those things that flop up off of the wing? What's this thing? What's this weird noise I hear when we land or take off? And so
You love giving them all the answers.
yeah, I try to give them the answer. And then when they kept insisting, they flew TWA between Indianapolis and Chicago, and I kept telling them you couldn't. We did not fly between Indianapolis. Oh no, I flew TWA. Impossible. So, but no, like I said, I went on to work for Express One for a short time, and that American Transair as a inspector. But I certainly enjoyed, as opposed to American Transair, did not like the job, and that's one reason why I retired early and stuff.
Do you remember what TWA's slogan was? What was their slogan?
Well, there was one up and away TWA.
Up and away TWA.
And the song, I've still got one of the records, the little records. I leave that to the kids. I figured someday that might be a collector's item. and yeah, I think that was probably the one I remember the most was that up and away TWA.
Okay. All right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, that's about it.
That's about it. Well, I thank you much for your service. And, it's good you still have some of the memorabilia, and maybe we can get that song to play as well. All right, Harold. Well, thank you very much for your time today. And this is for TWA Stories.